Thank you so much for joining. This is our deep dive session about different training use cases. I'm sure most of you know about Opus, but just in case, Opus is a hospitality training platform purpose-built for the frontline. We think deeply about how training integrates with operations so people can build skills they need on the job really quickly. And that includes the people who think about training all day, which is you. So we started these monthly sessions because our customers often ask us how other people have done X. So we've structured these sessions so you have the space to gain tangible, actionable ideas that you can implement in your own programs. So what are we here to learn today? There's so many different types of trainings that you implement or you think about, but we really wanted to focus and do a deep dive on 4 specific ones. So Lori will walk through specifically SOPs and product knowledge, and Natalia is going to talk about brand and people skills. Lori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Goldstrohm. Currently, I work for a company called Untamed Brands. I am the vice president of training and people and development. So I lead just about everything operationally, training, HR, payroll, a little bit of everything. And I've been here for a short time, but Untamed Brands is a parent company to 2 smaller brands. So one of them, which we'll talk about today, is Taim. So it's a Mediterranean fast casual restaurant. It's been around for 16 plus years and currently has, well, as of tomorrow, we will have 17 locations. And then the other company is called Hot Chicken Takeover. It's based in Columbus, Ohio, and we have 8 locations there. And we'll be rolling out Opus with them later on this year, hopefully. And then prior to that, my experience was with Kava. So hopefully a lot of you have heard of that, which when I joined the Kava family, I was there for 8 years. And I started when there were 9 locations and left when they were at 250 plus locations, and prior to that, Chipotle. So I do have experience with all levels of training and different sizes of organization and gearing up for growth in those organizations as well.
Great. Thank you, Lori. And
Sure.
Natalia?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Natalia. I am the Senior Learning and Development Manager for PLANTA Restaurants, which is a plant-based restaurant group. We almost have 14 locations, so our next location that's opening up will be in Brentwood, LA. I have been with PLANTA for a little bit over a year, and before here I was a customer success manager with a hospitality startup. But after college, I started out actually with Marriott in their management training program. So my background is mostly in hotel operations before getting into learning and development.
Well, thank you. This is where my job ends, and I'm going to pass it off to Lori and Natalia, and Lori is going to kick it off with standard operating procedures.
So I'm going to go through some things that, when I started putting this together, it was a lot of like, oh, I do this. I didn't even think about that I do this, but I've never really had somebody train me on how to do this. And I'm sure none of you have either. It's just something that whether you're an operator or in a training position now, or you've grown from operations to training, that you've just figured it out as you go. So as I was going through this, I'm like, okay, these are some things that I actually do that might help with some people out there. So what I'm going to do, so I put mine in an Opus course. So at the end of this, we can share out the Opus course for anybody who has Opus, or we can share it out with everybody else so you can take a look and see what we're doing. So when I'm thinking about rolling out new standards, product knowledge, any SOPs, I was thinking of a couple things. So I thought of like mentally how I went through the process myself and the steps that I took. And I came up with these 4 steps, and starting with creating your clear objectives. So I think as trainers, everybody knows you're supposed to write clear objectives, but let's say somebody says, I need you to roll this out next week. You don't necessarily follow these steps, but to be able to do really great rollouts and have them really impactful, you should always start with your objectives. Establish advocates. So we'll talk about that a little deeper. Define what success looks like and how you're going to measure it, and then start creating your curriculum. So throughout this, I'm going to go through an example of something that I recently did with Taim. So we, like I said before, we've been around 16 years, and we've always had the same falafel recipe. Nothing changed there, but the way we formed a falafel was changing. So we used to use this very traditional Israeli tool that you would use to form the falafel, but as a result, every restaurant had different sizes of falafel. Sometimes if they made them too big, they would be a little raw on the inside, or if they were too small, they would be, a little burnt. So we were changing the tool for the falafel. We rolled it out to about 250 team members, and some of those team members have been with us for 10 plus years. They've been there since the beginning. We have one team member, he's been doing falafel for 15 years the same way. So I also have new team members that have been with us, a month, a week, a day. So thinking of how to actually roll something out with that type of audience makes it a little bit more difficult. So I started with my objectives, and I just wanted to identify my learning objectives so that I could make really clear goals. And I think that one of the keys to this is to ensure that your goals align with your business KPIs so that you get buy-in from everybody throughout the organization, whatever the SOP or change or new item is. So when I do objectives, there's 3 things that I ask myself, and like, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to feel? So technically, on a learning level, it's the cognitive, the psychomotor, and the affective. So the knowledge, skills, or attitude. So ask myself, what do they need to know? And I'm thinking, okay, they need to be able to describe the importance of the consistency of the falafel and how it relates to the guest experience. They need to physically have a skill. They need to be able to demonstrate how to form the new falafel consistently. And what I really want them to feel is this is something that's easier for them. So it's saving them time and how they work. So if I can accomplish all 3 of these, I think this is going to be successful. Any questions so far? I'll just pause for a moment. Okay. So hopefully I'm making you hungry with all the taco falafel. But secondly, I'm thinking about, okay, how do I measure success of this? I'm going to put together metrics that will define success for me. And I think about a couple things. How does this impact our business? So does it make it easier for the team members? Is there a financial impact? Is there a labor impact? Does it impact the guest experience of it all? And how does it align with the mission and values? And I think all of those are extremely important, and they're very important to different people in your organization. So mission and values is extremely important to your people and your people teams. The guest experience, of course, is important to all of us. Labor impact on anything on your financials, really important from your CFO. And does it make it easier? Like, making people happy is really why we do what we do every day. And then I go in and I look, okay, how am I going to measure this? Over what period of time am I going to measure? How often am I going to report? And who am I going to report this to? And I don't think everybody thinks this through this early in the game, but I do, because I like to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is how you're going to know that we are successful. This is how often I'm going to report to you. And I do what I told them that I'm going to do. And that establishes a lot of trust as well. And then finally, what tools can you use to measure or track your performance? And when I think of tools, there's a couple things I think about, like checklists, dashboards, contests. What are the things that you can see that will show you the performance of these rollouts? And when I think of dashboards, you could do a full dashboard of financials, of learning, and of guest feedback. So when I think of financial, sales, labor, COGS, when I think of learning, I think of like an LMS, how you're tracking completions, how you're tracking engagement, guest feedback, whether it's Tattle, Yelp, Yext, whatever you use. I just want to show this too, because very proud of this little dashboard here that says with Opus, we're at 100% adoption and 92% engagement. So something to be really proud of. And then checklist. So a lot of you probably use some form of checklist, whether you have Zenput, 7 Shifts, Crunch Time, whatever it is, where you can capture photos or videos for verification of, and I believe we're going to be able to do that in Opus soon, but always defining clear measurements for your ops leadership too. Like if you want something to be successful, you need to say, okay, GMs need to do this, area managers need to do this, regional directors need to do this, just so everybody's following up so that you are successful. And then the fun part of it is anything with a contest or competitions. So if we're rolling something out, not necessarily in this example, did we do it, but the first restaurant to complete all their Opus training, the restaurant that sells the most of the new item that you're rolling out. I'd love to do region versus region or market versus market to see, pitch your area managers against each other and see who does it first. Add a little competition, it makes it fun for everybody. And then when I'm thinking of this rollout of the falafel with Taim, my success was around 95% completions of the Opus course, 0 tattle incidents. So we use tattle in an incident if you get rated 3 or below. And then a little contest sending the best video of balling falafel for a chance to win a prize. So getting people really excited about it. And by them sending in videos, you can actually see physically if they're doing it right, or if you need to do a little bit more coaching.
Lori,
yeah,
I had a couple of questions here. I loved how you have different levels of measuring success kind of along the way, but also as it aligns to your different stakeholders so that you're meeting objectives across the way. I think one, I'm curious, why do you've mentioned for you, this is really important to do right up front. Do you have any, can you elaborate why that you've learned that to be really important? Was there an example where perhaps you had to learn from a mistake that, that has made it really important?
Absolutely. I find, if whether it's myself or somebody on my team, if it's not well defined in advance, what's your success metric, it could move and you're chasing something that was never clearly defined. And I'm sure we've all done that in our lives. And once you start moving the ball, then you're measuring something different than really your original objectives. So do it early. That gets your operations team bought into it as well. And they really have a clear understanding of what is expected of them and by when and why it's important.
Okay. And Natalia, do you have anything to add here or your perspective? How do you think about learning objectives and measuring success in the trainings that you do?
Well, that's something that actually I personally struggle with. So thank you, Lori, so much. I've been taking notes as someone who's still fairly new to learning and development, and being in a company where there's only 2 of us in the department. This is something that I've been spending more time learning about, how exactly do we measure success? I find that I tend to be a little bit more emotions driven. I'm like, oh, well, everybody's happy. It went well. We did great, but that's not enough. That doesn't cut it as a measure of success. So I'm taking notes too.
No, I love the fact that we're all learning together and that you're willing to share that. And I think it's true. I think people being happy is one definition, but it is very anecdotal. And I think to your point, you need a very comprehensive suite. I think the second bit that you alluded to is around competition and how do you get people to be engaged, especially, and I thought what your interesting point is that you have some folks who have been balling falafels for 10 years, and they're probably the most reluctant to want to change their ways or thinking that they need improvement. And so, beyond competition, and I'll open this up to either one of you guys, have you found effective ideas in making fun and engaging training so that you can compel those everybody to be on board?
I can definitely speak to that. I mean, it depends what is in your curriculum that's going to make it fun and engaging. So contests always do that, but video content is a way to do it. And make the content not so serious, maybe a little bit more fun, and something that they feel, instead of like, people don't feel a lot about falafel. Like, you don't, like, it's a falafel, it tastes really great, we're really proud of it, but it doesn't, I don't know, really give you a feeling. So having other people talk about it, I think, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second with establishing your advocates too, Francis. So let me move on to that and let me get back to you on that. Because I think this is something that I never used to think about, and I always think about this now. And it's really, no matter what initiative you're doing, whether it's like a tweak to a standard, a new item, a new procedure, you have to have people behind you to be successful. And I think of the three most common categories that I use for this are the executive leadership, the operators, and subject matter experts. So when I think of like the executive leadership, without the C-suite behind you, like anything can easily just stall or completely fail. For me, the most influential executives is our COO and our CEO. And we are a very small company right now, but I've also done this in larger companies, and without those two, and most likely if it's a bigger initiative, your CFO, then if they don't know about it, they're not quite as supportive with you. So I always ensure that I'm talking to, right now, my CEO, my COO on everything that we're doing, and they're fully looped in. And then secondly is our operators. So they're the ones that are going to make everything credible for you. If they don't believe it, they're not going to make it happen. So it could be something really simple, but if they hate your idea, they're not going to do it. So I always involve GMs that have been around for a while, or a lot of people know and really respect, or your regional leaders, directors, people who have a lot of influence over the GMs. And then finally, the subject matter experts, anybody in support center, supply chain, depending on what it is, or like I love to do culinary, because I find in restaurants, everybody loves chefs. Like, they just, like, anytime a chef walks in the room, everybody listens to them. So I'm going to quickly talk about what we did with falafel, because I did have the advocacy of the CEO, COO, our chef Avi, and a GM who she used to be a GM. She's now the NRO training manager. So everybody knows her. And so I had Chef Avi and did little funny quotes throughout training saying Chef Avi says, and had his little head there. So it was kind of corny, but it was fun, and people love Chef Avi. And if he's saying it, they know it's the right thing to do. And then in our video that we did, we had Cindy, our NRO training manager, and everybody loves Cindy. So if Cindy's making the change, and she's been around for 6 years, then we are going to make that change too. So all of those things happen before I even start establishing curriculum. And then I dig even deeper into it. So I know I just took a whole chunk of time. So I'm going to pause right there, because you guys are going to have access to this anyway, because I do have a resources section of where some really great articles are for you. But I do want to leave time for questions and make sure Natalia has all of her time too.
Does anybody have an example that they shared where they feel like they did any of these sections pretty well, or have in a different way? Lily? I see Lila and Tina. We'll go with Lily first.
I just have a question.
Yes.
In a bigger company with advocates where, yeah, some of the culinary, some of the chefs, some of the executives are known, but we're dealing with like really big stores, and a lot of them that tend to like to operate separately. We're working on that. How do you recommend establishing advocates with that? I usually socialize material so that there's like advocates on the ground, but utilizing it within the training, do you have any insights on a bigger company?
Yeah, so whenever I was with Chipotle or even Kava, I'll say Chipotle because they're a huge company, that some of the rollouts, it's like Northeast does this, Mid-Atlantic does this, Pacific does this, right? So you have to get members of each of those regions, somebody that everybody knows, a face that they could be the person, we would do live feeds sometimes, and they would be the person on screen saying, this is how we do it. So it's a leader in their area that's telling it. And even if you do like live streams that are like one separate for each region, then you can easily have like Lori from Mid-Atlantic is teaching us this. We trust Lori. She's going to tell us the right thing. I'm going to follow what she's saying, and then do maybe 5 separate live stream events for them, or just put them. Sometimes at Cabo, we would do just like video calls, and we would give a piece of it to each of the regionals. So it's coming from their regional's mouth instead of from my mouth as somebody in the support center that I don't even know or care about.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Sure. And then Tina, you have your hands raised.
Yeah, I was just curious, while we're building content and we want to source videos, to your point, from like other locations, and it's not just us in the videos, is there like a rule of, and I don't know if it's a legality thing, of do you put hourly or salary, or do you do a mix of both in the actual videos? Because like our fear is sometimes that we'll put an hourly and maybe they're not with us anymore in 2 weeks or a month. Like, do you have a way that you follow?
It always happens where as soon as you put something in a video, they're no longer there. We have waivers that everybody signs, whether it's actually now it's in their onboarding. So basically they're signing a waiver saying any photo or video that we use with their likeness is ours, so that nothing can go wrong in the future. But, a lot of the simpler videos, we'll use voiceover, so we don't have to deal with that problem of people going away. But I always look at those people that have been with us forever, that we don't think they're leaving anytime soon too, because that just makes it a little bit easier.
No, that's great. The waiver and the onboarding is exactly the advice I was looking for. Thank you.
Sure.
Laura, I think maybe as an extension of that, your advocates probably also eventually go off and do their own thing or do something different. And so you're probably always having to find those new advocates. Like, what are some of the things that you would advise folks to make sure that you have trusted folks on your side?
Yeah, I mean, just part of our job is to build relationships with people. And whether it's in the restaurants with team members or managers or operators, or in the support centers. So, getting to know people, really what drives them, what motivates them, because if you're seen as a really valuable resource, especially like when anybody new comes onto the team, I make sure I'm all setting up 30 minutes just to meet and greet, get to know them, know what I do, know my processes too, and then become a resource for them. So in the future, when I need them for something, they're like, oh, Lori was so helpful with me. Now I want to do that for her. Not everybody wants to do a video for you.
Thank you so much, Lori. That was really interesting. And I loved how you presented the content in Opus as well. To switch gears, we have Natalia. I'm not going to switch up my screen because I think you're just going to start right away, but you're going to cover a couple of different topics around people skills and around brand and culture, which are pretty interrelated.
Thank you, Francis, and thank you, Lori. That was super helpful for me as well. So I'm going to talk about topics that are a little bit different. So I'm going to talk about brand and culture. And while I was preparing for this webinar, I realized that planning training around brand and culture often has to start at a much bigger, big picture level, as opposed to when you're training about a specific product that may be more black and white. And so it requires consideration of all the different facets of the business. That affect or are a part of brand and culture. And for me at Planta specifically, this involves thinking about how our brand and culture is perceived both externally, so by our guests and potential guests, and then internally by our team members or future team members. And so in other words, what is our service culture? And then what is our company culture? And if I were to describe the two, there's definitely an overlap in adjectives because we want to extend the same level of hospitality to our team members as we do to our guests. And so our service culture can be described as unobtrusive, but there's a level of intensity behind the scenes. And then when it comes to our company culture, we're very collaborative and teamwork focused. And the overlap in the two comes from being warm, authentic, friendly, and very inclusive and welcoming. And so going back to my first point about having to think of which parts of the business can affect the brand and culture, one of the first things that comes to mind is how we greet our guests at the host stand, or at the concierge stand, as we call it. And that leads me to my first example of our concierge service techniques course. So we always say that a guest's first impression of our service starts the moment they walk in at the concierge stand. And so it's really important for us to have concierge specific guidelines. And this course that we have in Opus is a good example of that. This course is not only required for all of our concierges, but it's required for all of our front of house team members and our leaders to take. So in this course, we'll cover topics like proper verbiage and body language and other communication standards, such as how to properly answer the phone. And we give specific examples. This course is part of our new hire training path on Opus, and it's complemented with on-the-floor training. The on-the-floor aspect, everybody in the front of house has to do it. You have to shadow and spend some time at the concierge stand. And so you'll see that there's a virtual online component to this, but there's also a hands-on in-person component to this training. When it comes to reinforcing the topics and refreshing the topics covered in this course, it's really up to the leaders to drive this. They're the ones who determine when and if retraining is needed based on our RESI scores, so our guest satisfaction scores, our reviews that come in, and then our secret shopper reports. And something else that we have to consider is what retraining and refreshing is going to look like for tenured employees, because there's only so many times that they can take an introductory course like this before they start to get bored. And so especially for tenured employees, we start to consider supplemental content that we can create, potentially in a different format, so that way we re-spark their attention, and then also we can appeal to different kinds of learners. And so something that we did to help complement this course is another course called Concierge Skills Practice. And essentially it's just a compilation of video examples of scenarios that could happen at the concierge stand. And we give like a good example and a bad example and break down each of them so that we can reinforce all of the topics covered in concierge service techniques and our other introductory concierge courses. Any questions about this one? I don't have as detailed of a visual as Lori, but hopefully that makes sense. I see a hand.
Yeah, Jalen?
So we are actually a new company starting out, and since you also use the hands-on portion of training as a complementary to your courses that you created, how do you ensure that whoever is performing the training, like boots on the ground, is actually like in compliance, what they're teaching the new employee is in fact like what was mentioned in the training? Like, how are you tracking that and the success of that?
Yeah, good question. At the moment, we don't have a formal system for tracking it. It's really up to our leaders to determine the best trainers on site. And we're working on developing a trainer program so that we have designated trainers in each location. But in L&D, we've equipped our leaders with sort of qualities to look out for in order to choose the best trainers. What happens a lot is we tend to think that the most seasoned employee is going to be the best trainer, but in reality, that's not always the case. So we need to think about, is that person motivated to teach others? Are they actually following all of our steps of service and our SOPs? And are they a good teacher? Are they going to take time and go through, everything that they're doing with their trainee? And so to answer your question, we don't have a formal system yet, but we definitely lean on our in-unit leaders to own that.
Thank you, Natalia. I'm curious if anybody else has anything that they've done to help ensure, it sounds like, in-person consistency. right? Just because people might have different styles of how they do it, or just because of like the day to day, it may not always be the most complete, like day in and day out. Oh, Tina?
Yeah, so one of the things that Becca's on this call, one of our openings that we did, we utilized the skill out with the trainers. So have the trainer show us in the skill out, and then they're certified on how to train from there. So they've shown you, and then you're trusting that they're going to train the hourly employee the correct way. So the skill out, I suggest if people aren't using that option, it's excellent.
The skill verifications, right?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Natalia, hand it back to you.
Awesome. And so our service techniques around the concierge stand are definitely very relatable to our service culture. But my second example, I wanted to talk about our company culture. And so one tool that we use to bring our company culture to life and get our team members bought in is using our company values. And this is definitely more of a multi-layered, multi-step process. So first, what we do is we set context for our hourly new hires in a new hire orientation Opus course that talks about our mission and values, among other things that they need to know about our company. For our salaried leaders, this happens either in person or via Google Meets, and it's led by someone from our people team. So that's the first step. Next, we create a visual reminder of our values with these posters that we have that we call them our Make an Impact posters. And those are up somewhere out of guest view in all of our restaurants. I have a picture here. And that's also part of like our opening collateral for any new restaurant. So this gets printed up really, really big and it goes somewhere in the restaurant so that it's always there for our team members to see. How do we make an impact in the world? And then what are the values that we live by? And then last but not least, certainly not least, because this is the most important step, is that our values are brought to life by our on-site operators. They have to be role models and lead by example. And pre-shift is a great opportunity to bring our values to life. Something that we encourage our leaders to do is choose one value either per day or per week that they can talk about during pre-shift. And something that they can do, or that I've heard some of our units are doing, is that they'll choose a team member who is a great role model for that specific value. And then it also works as a shout out for that team member during pre-shift to help boost their morale. And I think this initiative actually started very organically in one of our stores in Florida. And we loved it so much that we actually added a note about implementing this in a course that we have called Pre-Shift How To for Leaders. And so it's not something that we're requiring our leaders to do, but we certainly recommend it, as it's a great way to help bring those values to life, get our team members bought in, and get them to truly understand how their actions align with our values. And so this goes to show that when we're confident that we have the right leaders in place for us, we're able to give them more room and flexibility to truly add their own style and their own personality into bringing our values to life. And like we saw here, authentic, after all, is one of our values, and bringing the best version of yourself to work. Perfect. And a big takeaway for me was that allowing flexibility in training can be just as impactful as something that is very, very detailed and black and white. So that was like a big realization for me. I don't know if anybody else struggles with flexibility sometimes in training, but felt like I needed to share that. And then another general consideration, and this may be very specific to Planta, is that when it comes to developing any training around brand and culture, is that we can write content about what kind of feeling and atmosphere you want to create for a guest and any verbiage associated with it, for example. But at the end of the day, it's up to our leaders to really help drive. And I say that this consideration is very specific to Planta because we are a small but mighty team of 2 people overseeing almost 14 locations across the East and West Coast of the United States, and then also Toronto. And so we need to consider our existing systems of checks and balances, and to verify that our leaders are actually being effective in bringing our culture and bringing our values to life. We need to think about those systems, if they're going to be sustainable for us as we continue to grow as a company. Are they sustainable for us and the size of our department? And what can we do to make those systems of checks and balances better? And you may be asking yourself the same questions as well. Another key takeaway for me in preparing for this was that many trainings about our specs and standards that apply to the company especially definitely need to be as specific as possible. However, there are other areas in training topics like we just saw with brand and culture that allow for some more room for creativity and flexibility, and working for a company that allows space for both sides of the coin is really exciting for me. That's all I have for you all. With
Thank you,
questions?
Natalia.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? I had one, as you guys are probably thinking of your own, but you both, Lori and Natalia, talked about like how important it was to engage your advocates, right? And I think, Natalia, for your example, you're really leaning on your managers and your store leaders to be your advocates, to cater the trainings to the needs of their own employees, and to really role model that. And so beyond having like an individual relationship with your advocates, what are some things that you do on a more habitual basis within PLANTA and Untamed to help build that communication rhythm going, or relationship building at scale? Because I think, to your point, Natalia, it really depends on the scale of the business and like what's feasible.
Yeah, I think it's really easy right now at Taim with, you know, we're so small, but when you think of Chipotle, where thousands of people you have to impact with everything that you do, like building those relationships is really difficult sometimes. So, you know, I always found who was the best whatever in the region, like who is the best person managing labor. They're my go-to person. Who's the best person that has, I don't know, the excellent customer service scores. Like find your subject matter experts in each of those markets for the big ones. I think sometimes it's hard in a smaller company too, because our L&D team is a team of 2 people as well. And we have 2 different brands to support, but it allows you to get to know people on a whole different level whenever you're small. So if you're small and gearing up for growth like we are, take advantage now of really taking the time to build the relationships. I think probably one of the best relationships you can establish is with your marketing team, because they typically have designers on their team and they have a really good set of eyes. And if you're running things past marketing and you accidentally use the wrong font, then they might say, hey, next time I'll do that because you're using the wrong color or whatever. I don't know. But those are some people that I definitely want to build relationships with.
I just wanted to add something that Lori actually alluded to earlier, is that when we have any new hires come on, specifically new leaders who are going through training, we always set up training check-ins with them. I usually send them an email on their first day with their training path, explain to them how to get on Opus and sort of what the general training expectations are, and let them know that we're available to them as a resource. And then we'll have an end of training check-in with them. And so establishing those relationships in the beginning has been really helpful for us, because we're able to be there for that person. But then when we need them, it's a lot easier, you know, to establish that reciprocal relationship. And then also for us, we use Slack as our main communication tool. And so there's a lot of leaders that I've never met in person, but I've been able to communicate with them through Slack and just like keep an eye out on what's going on in their store specific Slack channel, and give their kudos, give them shout outs, and just like be their champion virtually. And that's been super helpful for us too when we're looking for advocates.
Those are great ideas. Does anybody else have some thoughts or questions? I'm going to throw one out there before we end. Branding culture is something that I hear a lot, you know, it's especially for restaurants. And so I'm curious if anybody here has like something that you guys do that you think really gets employees excited and believing in like the mission of the business that they're working at. What's worked for you? Oh, Tina?
I think the biggest thing when we brought Opus on is that we have 9 brands, over 35 restaurants. So it's very difficult to create content for 9 brands that are continuously changing with seasonal menus and very culinary driven. So the biggest tool that could be consistent was the orientation and the HR portion, and just relieving the management team on property to have to host an orientation for every hourly employee that they hire. And, you know, we would love to say orientation is on a Tuesday at 3:00, but we know if we need a dishwasher and one walks in on Friday and they can start, that we're going to hire that person and get them started right away. And so now with Opus, with everything being phone based in the language of their choice, they're getting a proper orientation and they know the HR policies from minute one, instead of them not getting properly orientated and thrown into the business because we hired out of desperation. So the biggest excitement I think so far has been like, this is a tool to help you, and that your team members will learn everything about our company and HR on the first day. Now they're getting excited about the content that we're building for them based off of culinary and beverage, but just that one piece to make their job easier was the start of that excitement going for Opus. So I'd say if you can lock that in and get that, that's like the kickoff point for everything else. And it's not just GMs as your advocates, it's the chefs, because the chefs want to get people hired too. And so it's front of house and back of house. So that makes it even better.
Great. Please give Natalia and Lori a huge thanks for walking through their experience. It was super thoughtful, super actionable, and I hope everybody found something that they can take away. So, and thank you all for participating. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.